Good. Welcome to the one meeting this year of the Commission on School Construction and Modernization. I'm going to start with roll call and do it a little bit differently because we have some new members. So I'm going to ask everyone, starting with Dan Gecker on my left, just introduce yourself, where you're from, and your role on this commission.
Okay. I'm Dan Gecker, apparently on the chair's left, and I am president of the Virginia Board of Education.
I'm Delegate Ronnie Campbell from District 24 in the House of Delegates.
And I'm Dave Richardson. I'm the state treasurer. I'm happy to be here.
I'm Bill Schroep. I'm the superintendent of schools in Florida Heights, Virginia.
Sean Crumlish, Executive Director, Virginia Resources Authority.
Joe D'Amico, Director for the Department of General Services.
Michael Mall with the Director of Department of Planning and Budget.
Senator McClellan, Chair.
Jeff Bourne, Delegate from the 71st District.
Okay, and I'm sorry, we do have a member joining us by phone. I think.
Hi, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Stuart Robertson, President of Mosley Architects. Thank you for letting me connect by Zoom today.
Absolutely. And we will be having additional new members. I don't believe the speaker has made all of his appointments yet, and we do have one House vacancy. So this will be the only meeting we have before session. And so we will meet those new members after session. We wanted to start with, we had a pretty successful legislative session from the commission. We had a number of recommendations we made last year and made pretty good progress on both bills and particularly budget and funding for school construction. So I thought we would start with a report from Tyler Williams from the Senate Finance Committee on what happened in the 22 session. Yes.
So I'm going to give a summary of actions on 22.
Is your microphone on?
Yes,
Okay,
it's on now.
thanks.
Okay. So the 22 session, you saw almost $1.3 billion provided for a combination of grants and loans for school construction. About $850 million is for grants. A portion of those grants, half of them is formulaic, going to every school division. They're flexible. I'll go into more detail. There's $450 million, the remaining of the grants that are competitive, so those are focused on divisions with poor building conditions and higher fiscal need, and that's a one-time grant. I'll go more into detail on that as well. And then there are modifications to the literary loan program, and that provided or authorized up to $400 million, $200 million each year for the low interest rates from the literary fund. So starting with the formulaic program, there's $400 million for construction grants that go to every school division. This is similar to the program that existed prior to the recession. Each school division receives a base allocation of floor payment, so the small divisions get $1 million, and then beyond that they receive a weighted ADM or based on the pupils that they have enrolled. Expenditures are pretty flexible, and I would note that it can be used for debt service on projects completed or initiated during the last 10 years. And then it authorizes that school divisions can carry these funds into future fiscal years so they can be spent beyond just this biennial budget. The next program is the School Construction Fund and Program. This relates to the competitive grants, but this is House Bill 563 and Senate Bill 473. This was the recommendation from the Commission last year to establish the School Construction Fund and Program to award grants to fund the construction, renovation, or expansion of public school building. And it directs 98% of the state's casino gaming revenues to that fund. And then it directs the program to be administered by the Board of Education as set forth in the Appropriation Act. In addition, that bill also requires the department to develop and maintain a data collection tool to assist school boards to determine the relative age of school buildings. And they could consider using the Department of General Services existing tool to meet that requirement. And then it requires the school boards to provide the information to DOE timely. And that was related to recommendation 2 and recommendation number 7. So the portion, this is the competitive grants program. This is established in the budget as required by House Bill 563 and Senate Bill 473. It provides $450 million to establish that new competitive construction assistance program. The ongoing funds would be provided by the gaming revenue, the casino gaming revenue. It requires the Board of Education to establish the grant selection process, which Kent Dickey will present on after me. And then it determines the grant awards based on the local composite index of a school division or the fiscal stress of that locality. And they can receive up to 30% of the project cost. And then it caps eligible project cost at $100 million, which excludes financing cost, outdoor athletic facilities, loose equipment, and furniture from those eligible costs. And that was recommendation number 2, which was related to Senator McClellan and Delegate O'Quinn's bill. And then finally, the literary fund loan modifications. This authorizes $200 million in each fiscal year for school construction loans from the literary fund. The General Assembly allocated additional general funds to support teacher retirement costs, which freed up the literary fund to be able to issue construction loans for the first time in a long time. And then it made modifications to the program, such as increasing the maximum loan amount from $7.5 million to $25 million. It requires the Board of Education to annually benchmark the index for the interest rates based on the market, and sets what the maximum interest rate can be for the divisions with the lowest LCI. And then it establishes an annual open application process for loans, and authorizes the board to remove projects that had been inactive for 5 years from the loan waiting list. Senator McClellan, that is the end of my remarks. I would note the literary fund loan modifications were recommendation number 1 last year, and that was out of the work of the Department of Treasury and Department of Education.
Thank you. And for all of the members, you have in your materials the report on the interim activity of the commission for 2021. The recommendations that Tyler referenced are towards the back, starting on page 10. And all of the presentations from the meetings that are referenced in this report, you can find on the commission's website under sort of interim commissions, as will be in these presentations today, will be posted there as well. And I think there were some other recommendations that did not make it through the legislative process, and I don't know if either Stephen or Ryan, if you all could just briefly highlight the ones that did not pass.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So as Tyler mentioned, you got recommendations 1, 2, and 7. Recommendations 3, 4, 5, and 6 did not pass. Recommendation 3 was the one relating to the additional 1% local sales and use tax, authorizing that statewide. Currently, there's about a dozen localities that are authorized to do that, and that one did not pass. Recommendation number 4 was a Section 1 bill directing the Board of Education to make recommendations to the General Assembly for revisions to the SOQs to establish some standards for operations and maintenance for and new construction for public school buildings. Delegate LaRocque carried that bill, and that one also did not pass. Recommendations 5 and 6, both generally related to the issue of whether a local school board has the authority to use unexpended funds at the end of the school year for school construction, to sort of keep those as a reserve, or sort of build up a war chest for school construction in the future. current law requires those funds to be turned back to the locality, and those recommendations were considered on both the House and the Senate side, and neither of those passed.
Are there any questions for either Tyler or Ryan on the proposals from last year, the recommendations from last year that passed or failed? Hearing none, thank you. We will move to our next agenda item, and that is, as you heard, one of the bills required a report to this commission on the guidelines for school construction and assistance, and Kent Dickey is here to do that.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Just a brief overview for you of the recently adopted guidelines by the Board of Education for the School Construction Assistance Program, and that's the $450 million competitive grant program that Tyler just overviewed for you. Of course, the $450 million is, and the program is created in the Chapter 2 budget, as well as the $450 million appropriated in Chapter 2. That's $400 million from the general fund and $50 million in cash available from the literary fund for the $450 in competitive grant availability. And the charge is for the Board of Ed to award competitive grants for school construction and renovation for projects demonstrating poor building conditions, commitment, and need, and the focus is on high-need communities, localities, and poor building conditions. Any unobligated funding is to be reappropriated for the same use in FY24, so that will be a helpful provision given the startup of this program that involves capital projects. And the board guidelines recently adopted at their November meeting really first and foremost aligned to the bullets at the bottom of that first slide. Those are the key provisions in the Appropriation Act language. We, with working with the board, really began from those Appropriation Act provisions, some of which Tyler overviewed for you. Most importantly, the 10, 20, or 30% grant amounts tied to approved project costs is the basis for the competitive grant awards, and that's dependent on the school division's composite index and the fiscal stress designation of the locality. And the board, in devising the guidelines, reviewed drafts at both the October and November meetings, offered opportunities for public comment during that period of time, did adopt a final version at its November 17th meeting. However, with direction to DOE staff to work with the Office of Attorney General to incorporate language that would allow projects beginning construction on or after July 1 to apply for funding. Not that those projects necessarily would be awarded funding. They would still be subject to the competitive criteria I'll overview in just a moment. But for that window of time post July 1, for projects in high-need localities, high-need projects, beginning construction. As we began the biennium, the board directed that scenario be written in as eligible to apply, and we currently are working with Attorney General's office on language to weave into the guidelines. The guidelines themselves, again, incorporate requirements from the Appropriation Act, set out some of the operational requirements and procedures for the application process, and establish the competitive scoring criteria that will be used to award grant projects. These are some of the application procedures and requirements the board established to govern the application process when we do launch the open enrollment or application period. In the coming weeks, school divisions will use an online application process, and we're working on that now. Standard criteria for application eligibility are in that second bullet. The projects must be in the local planning phase, have already been planned or documented in a local CIP, lack sufficient funding to cover the full cost, not yet started construction. So really the emphasis here is on new and emerging projects in high need localities that need state support. And again, pending OAG review and board approval, language that would permit projects beginning construction on July 1 or after to be eligible for application. School divisions have to include key data points in the application, the estimated cost of allowable portions of the project, essentially the capital components of a project, planning A&E, the core building structure, site preparation, site acquisition, those types of eligible costs. They've got to obligate the state granted funds within 6 months of receiving the grant award on the project. They must provide information on planned preventive maintenance for the completed project to help support useful life. We want to board was interested in seeing that key information, and then we've asked that they submit their currently approved CIP of the school board or the locality that would list the applied project as documented in a CIP. As is common with DOE grant application projects, school division should be in good standing with all other state requirements, regulations, policies, and guidelines. And then following the application process after it closes, and staff review and technical assistance, verification of data, in the ensuing months, projects recommended for funding will be brought to the board for board action. Again, the key component of both the Appropriation Act language and in the guidelines are the level of grant awards that may be made, 10, 20, 30% of approved project cost. Again, at the higher levels of 20 or 30%, benchmark or aligned to local need, as you can see there in the first column, based on the lower composite index level or the more significant locality fiscal stress score. And the Appropriation Act limits the maximum project cost at $100 million, on which the 10, 20, and 30% grant award amounts would be based. So that in the extreme, the highest a school division could be awarded would be 30 million if it was a large high school project, for instance. And then competitive scoring criteria. The submitted applications, of course, will be evaluated and scored on 11 competitive criteria the board established in the guidelines on a maximum 100-point scale, attempting to align to and reflect the commitment, need, and poor building conditions categories that General Assembly established in the budget language. The budget language also required a minimum qualifying score on the criteria in order for a project to be further considered in the review process for an award, and the board established that minimum qualifying score is 65 points on the 100-point scale. And then I'll touch, Madam Chair, on the 11 competitive scoring criteria. I think you do have the full board guidelines document in your package. And again, within these 11 or across these 11 criteria, we've tried to capture the spirit of the need commitment, poor building conditions, and you see across the criteria the various point values in terms of severity of need and the gradation of the point values. Again, the maximum points that can be awarded is a maximum of 100, minimum of 65 to be considered for an award. Type of project, ADA access, level of building deficiency, and you see the gradation of points that can be awarded there based on need or significance of need. Free lunch, free reduced lunch eligibility, getting at the needs of the student population. Essentially, that's that point scheme there is divided based on quartiles of the distribution of free lunch eligibility data, composite index, another key piece of local ability to pay, and you see the 3 cut points there and the associated points. Small amount of points where it's documented the project being applied for has been fully approved in a local CIP, which we would like to see. Local commitment, where the applicants will certify that there'll be a maintenance of local funding support for the public schools during the project, financing, and there won't be any reduction in local effort for the local public schools, given the acquisition of debt to support the project, or that the project is really shovel ready and that project design and site acquisitions have been completed. So the local commitment to the project. Locality fiscal stress, that's the standard data generated usually annually from Department of Housing and Community Development, reflecting several locality fiscal measures into that standard index. It's been around a couple of decades, and you see the point levels there. And then lastly, locality poverty level. That's not just the school population, that's the latest U.S. Census data for the locality as a whole to capture community need. And then lastly, Madam Chair, criteria 10, other building conditions, which we have some data on internally. We'll also collect some data on the application directly to capture that criterion. And then lastly, locality debt capacity, how tapped out is the locality in terms of assuming debt for capital projects and indicative of a need for state support. So that represents what the board established in the guidelines for the competitive criteria. And then the board also, Madam Chair, has December 1 annual report due to the General Assembly written into the Appropriation Act. That report is going over to DLAS today with a few recommendations the board approved in the bottom part of that slide. And these were largely based on comments from school divisions, localities, some of the key statewide organizations related to allowing some recognition of multiple years of composite index and fiscal stress data tied to the 10, 20, and 30% grant awards versus just use of the latest data values in recognition of changing local economic conditions or data anomalies that may occur with a single year of data. So the board has highlighted that in the December 1 report going over to you today. And then lastly, recommendations as we continue to work on the final language to allow projects where construction began July 1 or after, including that or formalizing that provision in budget amendments during the General Assembly session this winter. and as well as related to those types of projects, in that very last bullet, a provision that would allow, as a form of a capital cost on a new project, allowance to use grant funding for principal-only portions of debt service that has not yet begun on a project, but debt service or debt has been entered on a project where construction is pending or just begun. Again, really tied to that small window of projects that were just coming online for construction as the biennium began July 1. And then lastly, next steps, completing the final language the board requested of department staff to work in a very final version of the guidance. And we're actively working with Office Attorney General to complete that. Completing the online application form for divisions we'll use to apply for grant funding, and then to launch the initial application process, announcing the application period by SOUP's memo to school division. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a quick question on the last bullet. Do you have a rough estimate of when the application period might open and how long the window would be?
I think likely we're really looking at, given the holiday season, some of these final tasks that need to be completed. I think at some point in January of 23. I mean, I think we are going to flip over to the new year, and you know, we're as eager as anyone to get it launched and get it ready to go. But I think we're looking at January and perhaps even later in the month.
And how long will the grant window be open?
Yeah, we you know, and in fact, tomorrow, the superintendent's memo will come out, be released to school divisions on the new application process for the literary fund. We're holding that open for 10 weeks. And again, allowance for the holidays. And so I would imagine we may, have the open enrollment application period may probably align to that, maybe 8 to 10 weeks, I would estimate. You know, with capital type of projects that it takes time locally, of course.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission? Senator McPike. And before you ask your question, if you could introduce yourself and where you're from.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeremy McPike, 29th Senate District, Manassas Park, Prince William County. My question is in relation to criteria 10 on facility condition, index of existing buildings. I presume that applicants have to use the new general services tool to run through to determine what good, fair, and poor is.
Yeah, we are primarily will be using building inventory data that was collected for this commission in spring of 21, summer of 21. That will be our primary data point. We will collect some supplemental data. The maintenance reserve process funding and project in conjunction with DGS, that data is not available yet. That we're in the final stages of the planning with DGS to launch that data collection with school divisions. So that is going to be a winter, spring 23 data collection effort.
Okay, one follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chair. So what have there been determined benchmarks of what each definition mean in terms of good, fair, and poor for a facility condition index? In other words, is it 100 to 85 as a index of replacement value, or 85 to 70? What are the sort of the benchmarks that schools will be looking at?
The criteria there will likely be just the relative condition of building systems, roofs, walls, foundation, flooring, windows, doors, HVAC, electrical.
Yeah, my question is, what is the value of each of the definitions to achieve fair or poor? What is the value difference of the condition index? In other words, the replacement value of the asset divided by the total replacement of deferred capital replacement. So I presume those are values, numerical values that are generated in ranges to achieve each of those, or what are the benchmarks to those definitions? That's my question.
Yeah, the building conditions that will rate as poor, fair, or good will be based on the components of the building that, are at the end of useful life or totally deficient and need of replacement. And so, good condition would be, where light renovation might be needed to just finishings or furnishings in the building versus poor condition where it's a totally obsolete, deficient structure. Every major component of the building is end of useful life and in need of total renovation or replacement. Fair would fall somewhere in between. So we'll operationally define that in the online instructions to school divisions.
Yes. I'm sorry, one more follow-up real quick.
Yes, Senator Pike.
So where does, and at least another question, which is where does actually seating capacity factor into either building conditions or other determining weighting factors? In other words, if I have a school, the classrooms are built for 20 and I've got 35 in a classroom as a part of component, how does that weight in the factor in terms of the overall systems of actually seats?
We've not directly built in capacity of the building relative to current enrollment. It's tied and really aligning more strongly to overall building conditions of the structure and systems.
Delegate Bourne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dickey, I was intrigued and interested when you started describing, in response to Senator Pike's question, the conditions of poor, fair, and good. And I wonder, one, whether you've had a lot of interest from local school divisions really chomping at the bit to try and figure out when they're going to be able to apply for this money. Because anecdotally, I would say that probably all of the schools, or the vast majority of the schools in the city of Richmond would be poor. And if that's the case, and we have a lot of poor school divisions across this Commonwealth, would we find ourselves in a position to be oversubscribed?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. In terms of enrollment,
would we get more applications than we have money to give out?
Right? Yes, sir. No, thank you for that. Absolutely. In an oversubscription situation with, relative to funding requests that are approvable against the $450 million, the awards or the criteria scores will be rank ordered, and grant awards will be made based on the rank ordering of the criteria scores, and that's set forth in the Appropriation Act language. So absolutely, if approvable grant requests exceed the $450 million available, it will be on the basis of the ranked scores.
I was just wondering whether or not has DOE received a bunch of questions and really interested, ready to hit the send button on an application whenever it's available. And I asked that because the criteria, the application window, as you said, is probably not going to be until January 23. And so as we move into legislative session, I think for us in the legislature, we might want to consider whether or not we pursue additional funding to put in there, given, while there is some uncertainty, there is, it's a fairly good economic condition right now to put some more money in so that we can help more school divisions.
Yeah, certainly appears to be substantial interest, obviously, in this. Phone calls, emails, contacts at meetings, prompts on, timeline when the application's going to be released, in regional meetings with superintendents, questions about timing and the criteria. So a lot of interest, a lot of discussion, and as you would imagine. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd remind the commission, and particularly for the new members, when we did a survey of the condition of school buildings across the Commonwealth, over 50% of our school buildings are 100 years old or older. The replacement cost for those is over $25 billion. And not to say that just because a building is over 100, you'd want to replace it, but that does at least give you an idea of the scope of, I mean, they're 50-year-old buildings that are in poor condition, and there's some that don't necessarily need a full replacement, but need significant renovation. So I think we knew on the day we voted on the budget that we probably are going to need to seek more funding, if not for this fund or for the literary fund loan program. But I think as part of our discussion for agenda item 4, and we may not be able to think of an amount, but I suspect one of the recommendations coming from this commission might be for more money to go in both of these funds. Any other questions? If we could get, if you could send to Ryan a copy of the new literary loan fund criteria, I think that would be helpful for the members to see as well.
Yeah, sure.
And then we can put that on our website as well. And then the report, once that is submitted, we'd like to have that provided to Ryan to send to the members and to post on our website as well.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All
thanks,
right.
Madam Chair.
So next on our agenda is our discussion of our legislative priorities for 2023. And I think since the board's report to be filed today includes 3, that seems to me a good place to start. You've heard the recommendations. Does anyone have questions on those recommendations? Any discussion or motion on whether those should be official commission recommendations?
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like we have 2 on the phone now. Okay.
Yes, I've been on all the time. I just didn't want to disturb you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, we have, in addition to Wilma, we've had another commission member join us, so we'll let them join in the fun of introducing themselves. And I'll start with you, Wilma, if you can just say your name and where you're from.
Hi. Oh, let's see. Hello, Wilma Barrow from Richmond, Virginia. Retired educator, retired school principal.
I'm sorry. Are you?
Yeah.
And are you a commission member?
No, citizen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you don't get to vote when we
Okay.
vote, but we definitely value your input, and we will take that as your support.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Delegate LaRock, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave LaRock, 33rd House District, Western Loudoun, Clark and Frederick, and apologize for walking in a little late. If you could direct me to the list that we're voting on or have voted on, I would appreciate that.
Yes, so in this blue presentation, overview of the Board of Education guidelines for implementing, not the other one. On the last, on page 11, where they discuss the report from the Board of Education that they are required to provide to the General Assembly today. These are 3 recommendations that board report includes.
I'm trying to figure the top from the bottom still. Sure. Page.
It says page 11 at the bottom of the slide.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll just order those recommendations 1, 2, and 3 as they're listed.
I'll be a yes on that, please.
Okay. And then of the recommendations from last year, I know there is at least one that we will want to discuss, and that is, and I've gotten lots of inquiries about whether this would be a recommendation of the commission again, which is, I don't remember what number. recommendation number 3 from last year, to expand the authorization in the code that about 9 localities have now to levy a sales tax, sales tax up to 1% if approved by the voters in a referendum. I've gotten several inquiries as to whether that will be one that we put forward again, and so I'll open that up for discussion.
Madam
I'll take
Chair,
a motion to, yeah.
I don't see the reason why we wouldn't bang our head against that wall again. I mean,
Okay. Is that a motion?
if there's no more discussion, I'm certainly happy to make that motion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may. So inasmuch as today is the deadline for pre-filing, have these been drafted in some form?
We have till 5 PM. So let me back up. And we'll work with Ryan on this. 2 of the proposals we just voted for would be in the budget. So we'll wait and see if they're in the governor's budget, and if not, we can designate members to put budget amendments in. The first one, I guess, I don't know if this is better a question for Tyler or Ryan. Would the first one be legislation, or is that something we would do through a budget amendment?
Madam Chair, I think this would probably go in the budget as well, because the bill basically refers you to the budget for the criteria and the various factors in this grant program. So it'd probably be budget. And
Okay.
Tyler's nodding his head too.
Okay, so we've got to see the governor's budget and then decide if they're in there, great, and if not, we'll put in budget amendments on those.
That's 1 and 2, Madam Chair?
That's 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, 3 looks like a bill that I filed last session, if I'm not mistaken, or I'm just bringing it up partly because if that's correct, then
We can file it as a bill.
it could be filed as a bill without pre-filing, I think. I don't know that I've given it enough thought to say commit to it, but it exists in a form, if in fact this coincides with the bill that I had drafted and filed last year. Perhaps somebody who's maybe quicker with the internet than I, like someone like
Ryan, you would
Ryan
have drafted that.
confirm that.
That's correct, Delegate and Madam Chair. That was House Bill 1099 from last year, corresponded with recommendation number 3, and that was Delegate LaRocque's bill.
Okay, so we could file that as a bill, and if we want to. So we'll, Ryan asked that get drafted. And if you think that the other 2 can be handled through the budget, we don't have to have a bill, but if somebody wants to carry one separate as a bill, we can do that too. For the sales tax, I think I heard a motion and a second. That would have to be a bill, which we have until 5 PM to get drafted for pre-filing. And, oh, by the way, any commission, at least on the Senate side, I'm not familiar with House rules. On the Senate side, any official commission recommendation will not count towards individual bill limits for drafting or filing. Jeff and David, I don't know if you know if that's the case on the House side or not.
Madam Chair, as I was following Ryan's response to the inquiry, I think 1099, it relates to the sales tax, and that would be approved by a referendum. Am I?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about this.
Yeah, I didn't quite get that out of.
Yes,
what I
okay,
see
I'm
on the
sorry.
paper,
Forget
but,
everything I said.
That's okay. So if this is a 1, 2, 3 list of recommendations from this commission, then where does the sales tax?
That would be number 4.
That'd be 4, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the pending motion, which, yes, any further discussion on the pending motion?
Perhaps just raise the question, is it the consensus among members of the commission that is the best approach to have? I mean, that That would be a piece of legislation?
Yes.
No, I guess budget language could accomplish the same, but that would.
That's
be-
right. No, for the sales tax, that has to be legislation. It was legislation last year that you and I carried, and it would be a bill this year that I know there is lots of support on both sides of the aisle for.
Thank you.
So all in favor of that being our recommendation number 4, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Are there any other proposals that anyone would like to bring forward? If not, I would ask, even though a public comment is technically after our discussion, is there anyone in the audience who has a recommendation you would like to bring to the commission for consideration?
If there's anybody in the Zoom room who would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically and I'll bring you into the room.
Yes, come forward. Please state your name.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Ken Nicely. I'm Superintendent of Schools for Roanoke County Public Schools.
How are you?
Glad to be here today. Thank you very much. I just want to offer some public comments. And first of all, thank you for the work of this commission and for your commitment to school construction and modernization. As you're well aware, this is an enormous need across Virginia. We're very appreciative of the formulaic grant that was mentioned earlier. We've already put that to use to purchase land for our new CTE, a specialty center. That's going to be the largest capital project that has been undertaken in Roanoke County. The competitive grant, I just want to affirm that yes, school divisions like ourselves have been eager and have a huge level of high interest to pursue those. We've been eager since summer to know what the criteria is going to be and to be able to hit that send button. We're ready to hit the send button. I want to thank Mr. Dickey for all his assistance. He's been very responsive. I also want to affirm that the needs exceed the funding. So anything the commission can do, and I appreciate your interest and willingness to make that a priority recommendation for the upcoming General Assembly. Despite all of our preparation and commitment to compete for the competitive grant, I'm very concerned that our CPS is going to be left out in the cold when it comes to actually being eligible, because again, the needs across Virginia exceed apparently what's going to be available. A little background, Roanoke County is about the 20th largest school division among the 131 in Virginia. So we're right there in the middle. We serve over 13,000 students in 27 schools. I'm very proud to say, we've made steady progress over the years toward modernization. Our current CIP does focus on 9 of our schools. These were all built in the 1960s, prior to 1972, and I can say as a 1967 model myself, yeah, we're getting age on ourselves, and these buildings are as well. They're desperate need of renovation. We strive to maintain our facilities, especially keeping a focus on safety, but again, our needs exceed our resources and means to do so. The 9 schools that are currently on our CIP are all schools that were built like I say, in the 1960s, prior to 1972, early 70s. 2 of those schools are elementary schools that were actually built as the fad at the time with open concept classrooms. And I'm amazed at what our teachers are able to accomplish and our students in those environments. But it's an extra obstacle that gets in the way in terms of their success that needs to be rectified. That's at the top of our list, as well as replacing our aging CTE center, which was built in the 1960s. We've done all the due diligence to move forward with this replacement, including making sure it's on our CIP, garner support from our Board of Supervisors, which is very much in support of this. We've purchased the land to build our new CTE center. We've developed concept. We've done all the due diligence around this project. My point is the commitment's there. The preparation, the work has been done to move this project forward. We've involved our business community to get their input in terms of what our current business and industry needs in Roanoke County, Roanoke Valley as a whole, to support that with our new CTE center. Again, our commitment's there, but the way the criteria is set up for this competitive grant, I'm very concerned we're not going to reach the 65 point threshold to meet there, with the emphasis on some of the factors that we don't measure up to. The commitment's there, the fiscal stress there. We're the third or fourth highest taxed county in Virginia. So the commitment is there in terms of what the public is willing to put into that. But I just want to encourage this commission and thank you for your work to continue to keep this at the forefront, especially going into the new General Assembly session.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Jeremy Bennett, representing the Virginia Association of Counties, VACO. I just wanted to begin my remarks by expressing VACO's sincere appreciation to each and every member of the commission and to staff for all the arduous work you put into looking at this issue last year, identifying the $25 billion need across the state, and then making recommendations that resulted in a historic investment by the state of $1.25 billion to help localities across the Commonwealth. So thank you for your efforts last year and your continued efforts this year. I did come in with 3 recommendations to make to the commission. You all were very proactive and adopted all of them.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. So thank you to the Board of Education, President Gecker, for making the recommendations to the General Assembly to adopt the, I guess it's recommendations 1, 2, and 3 for the the construction grant program, the assistance program, and then also the 1% local sales and use tax. That is a priority for VACO membership across the state. By no means is it a tax increase. It's a completely local option. The voters of those localities can decide if it's a right fit for them. But it's a way of having both the state and local partnership in education funding continue. So appreciate your efforts and Delegate LaRock's on that, and we'll definitely be supporting that during the session. And just in conclusion, thank you again for all your work on this. We'll be there to support you. Our members are very appreciative, very interested in applying for these funds. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is J.T. Kessler. I represent the Virginia School Boards Association. I want to echo the sentiments that you have heard today. We also had some recommendations, but you swiftly adopted them. Thank you, President Gecker, for making those recommendations as well. Thank you for all the work you've done. Thank you to General Assembly for investing in school construction, and we'll be there to support you if you want to put some more money in that account this year. Have a great holiday.
A quick question for you. If you were writing the budget, how much would you put in there?
$25 billion.
Thank you.
My name is Alex Gottschalk, and I am the Deputy County Administrator for Mecklenburg County, Virginia. I drove here today because I was extremely concerned about the ability for local governments to participate in the school assistance program that was discussed earlier. However, that concern has been alleviated thanks to the recommendations of the board. We were one of those counties that borrowed money this fiscal year in anticipation of construction next year, and we're hoping to participate in the program. Had the debt service prohibition remained, and if it does remain, then we would not be eligible for much, if anything, from that program. I just want to come up here and reiterate how imperative it is for rural and for low wealth divisions to be able to pay for debt service with these funds, because we do not have the funds available ahead of time in order to initiate any projects. A large city like Virginia Beach or a large county like Fairfax may, but none of us have $30 million on hand to start a project absent the ability to borrow money to commence that project. So to have the debt service, to be able to reimburse or pay for the debt service, which by the way, we've incurred but have not yet had any payment on. Our payment's not even till July 1, till next fiscal year. So to have the ability to pay for that with the funds from the grant, should we be awarded, would be absolutely essential for us and for many other communities throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I'm thankful for your adoption of that recommendation, and I just urge you all to, in conversations with budget writers, emphasize that point, that we need that provision amended in order to have the program be as useful for everybody as the General Assembly thought it would be. Thank you.
Thank you, and also thank you for your hospitality. For the benefit of the commission members, the school construction fund legislation was actually signed at a ceremonial bill signing, and I guess technically it was also a ribbon cutting for a brand new high school in Mecklenburg, and they rolled out the red carpet for us, so thank you for that.
Madam Chair, question?
Yes, Senator McPike.
Thank you. What's Mecklenburg's current debt capacity percentage?
Our current debt capacity percentage is based on the metric that's mentioned there. It's fairly low. It's between 2 and 3%, but almost all counties are fairly low because we have a lot of real estate tax, real estate property in counties, and therefore the scoring system conveys that we could have a lot of capacity. That doesn't mean we all actually have that capacity.
And what's your current real estate tax rate?
Our current real estate tax rate is 40 cents per hundred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josette Bolova. I'm with Virginia Municipal League. I just want to thank the Commission for all their hard work, and thank you, President Gecker, for all your recommendations from the board. It's very much appreciated. One thing I would like to recommend is that until revenue from the gaming proceeds fund is sufficient enough to significantly help communities pay for school construction or any renovation needs, the state should continue to use general funds to fill in that gap while the fund is being, padded. I would also like to add that having the 1% local option sales tax is a priority for VML members across the state, and we will continue to push for this next session. So thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I don't know if this is a question for that Ryan can answer or Tyler, but as I recall, only one casino is currently open and another one may open shortly.
Yes, Senator McClellan, you are correct. Total taxes to date on the Bristol Casino have been $7.2 million, and the portion that would go to school construction, which are now in the gaming proceeds fund, are $4.7 million. That was presented to Senate Finance in October, so that would be, you still have, there's a few months that I don't have in that number. And then lottery estimated that it would be about $23.4 million collected for fiscal year 23 from Bristol. My calculation is that would be about $15 million for the gaming proceeds fund that would then transfer to the school construction assistance program. Further, the JLARC report on casinos that just recently was issued noted that by 2028, the baseline model, which is 4 casinos, that would be Portsmouth, Norfolk, Bristol, and Danville, the only 4 that have been approved, that would generate about $102 million by 2028. That would then be the portion for the school construction gaming proceeds fund.
Okay, thank you. I believe we have someone on Zoom who'd like
Madam
to...
Chair, we have Keith Perrigan, who is on Zoom. I would, again, like to say that if anybody is in the Zoom room that would like to speak publicly, please raise your hand now. But Keith Perrigan, please unmute and go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Keith Perrigan, Superintendent of Bristol, Virginia Public Schools, President of the Coalition of Small and Rural Schools of Virginia, the Secretary and Treasurer of VASS, and a former member of this commission. I would like to provide comment on the School Construction Assistance Program. First of all, I'd like to commend the commission on behalf of all these organizations for its leadership in ensuring that the state provided more than $1 billion impact to school construction across the Commonwealth during the session last year. I hope that during the next GA session that we will make slight adjustments to the school construction. Some of those have been mentioned already, the School Construction Assistance Program, to ensure that as many divisions as possible can take advantage. Bristol currently has the 4th oldest buildings in the Commonwealth and has been working hard to find a solution to replace some of these buildings since 2011. Unfortunately, Bristol has reached their legal debt capacity and is struggling financially because of bad decisions by former city leaders. However, because of the hope that this budget language provided, and along with creative financing that was provided through our Industrial Development Authority, we finally were able to get a project approved that will shutter and consolidate 3 of the oldest school buildings in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Unfortunately, this decision will cause our school division and students to have to sacrifice in other areas in the future because of our city's continual financial stress. If the recommendations of the Board of Education and those recommendations you talked about early are approved by the Attorney General and make it through, Bristol's project will be eligible for the School Construction Assistance Program. However, there are multiple other projects that will be in process or completed during this biennium that won't qualify. Radford and Mecklenburg are just 2 examples. It is my hope that slight modifications will be made this session to the School Construction Assistance Program that will provide much needed resources to high poverty school divisions. And again, some of these have already been mentioned, but those modifications include considering a 10-year look back period that is consistent with the School Construction Grant Program, that every school division division gets to take part in. That was also approved last session. However, if a 10-year look back is not allowed, consider making all projects that were either started or completed during this biennium eligible for the assistance program. Obviously, we've already talked about allowing debt service to be an improved use of the fund, and then also considering the need-based criteria for awarding the grant to either use the current information or a 5-year average, whichever benefits the locality the most. And one more time, I would like to say thank you to the commission for your leadership in this area. This is truly going to be life-changing and have a generational impact on high poverty school divisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Perrigan. I was trying to follow your recommendations with the 3 that we just adopted. And if you could, it sounds like some of your recommendations we've already adopted. Is there anything else specifically you want us to move forward, you would like for us to consider to adopt
Yes,
the recommendation?
I think
today?
the main difference, Senator McClellan, is the look back. Right now, with the recommendations approved by the Board of Ed, it has a look back just to the beginning of the biennium, any project that started after July 1.
Yes.
However, there were some projects that were started slightly before, and they may not finish up until somewhere in the biennium. And that our recommendation is that any project that is in process during the biennium be considered as eligible for this assistance program.
Okay, so if I understand that correctly, then what you're asking us to modify the recommendation we adopted that says school projects where construction began July 1st, 2022. You would ask that we change that to 2012?
Yes, and if a 10-year look back would deplete the fund too much, at least including any project that is in process during the biennium.
Okay, thoughts from the commission or any discussion on that from the commission? Okay. Is that something we would want to adopt as a recommendation?
Madam Chair, I don't disagree with it in spirit, but given the circumstances and the limited funding available, I think if I understand this right, this would be funding projects that perhaps are even complete through this program, in preference over ones that might be applying for new construction. Is that generally applicable?
I think it's saying, well, his caveat that I heard is if they were still in process during the biennium, they would be eligible, not if they were complete. Is that right, Mr. Perrigan?
Yes, Senator. If the 10-year look back, and that may deplete the fund too quickly, looking at projects that are already complete, considering the number of projects that have been completed over the last 10 years. So if that's not feasible, at least considering those projects that would complete during the biennium. That way, they might not be able to use that money to begin the project, but they could use it for debt service on principal only.
Okay, Mr. Gecker, was that something that the board discussed?
Honestly, no, we didn't discuss completion. We specifically discussed the desire to be flexible to go back to projects in planning that may have started basically as right after the biennium. I think there might be some concern about, going back to projects that are otherwise fully funded, if you will, and now giving retroactively money to them.
Okay. Well, the commission operates on motion, so if there is no motion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, question for Mr. Gecker then. Was that a recommendation of the board?
The recommendation came from the board because we were told that under the current language, projects that might have counted on or planned for this money, because our guidelines weren't done yet, wouldn't be eligible. And so what we asked the staff to do was go back and see if we could have the guidelines be effective essentially the first day of the biennium. So for projects started, planned for this biennium, who are looking for this funding. there was no discussion, and I, don't like to get ahead of the board, so I don't want to tell you there was any. There was no discussion about whether we should fund projects that were, as I said, fully funded in a sense locally before this program even started.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, I think I agree with the spirit of the first part of that borders on a recommendation, and if you would care to help us shape a motion, I think that I'd present that motion to the commission.
I think
we've already done that.
Yeah, we've done that. So what the recommendation that he's talking about, we adopted as recommendation number 2, saying that if the project construction began July 1, 2022, it would be eligible. Because right now, under the Budget Act, it's not. Okay. All right. Yes. Yes.
Keith, would it help if we went back to July 1st, 2021?
Keith, would it help if we went back to July 1st, 2021? Because you're right, I think 10 years is going to deplete the fund.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm not familiar enough with actual start dates of projects. I do know of some projects that are currently going on that have not been completed but will complete during the biennium, but I don't know their start date. I assume that July 21 would be better than July 22, but however, July 22 is also better than what the current language has. So I certainly don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, just trying to advocate to have as many school divisions eligible for the program and still at the same time maintain the integrity of the program.
Thank you. All right, well, I do not hear a motion. This is something we can revisit in 2023, but I do not hear a motion to move forward no, 2023 is in a month. I do not hear a motion to move forward in 2023. We can consider during our meetings in 2023 whether to move forward in 2024. All right. Yes, who's on first? Okay, and I think we probably should adopt as an official recommendation and maybe leave the number vacant until we see what the budget looks like that's introduced on the 15th. But we may want to adopt as an official recommendation putting additional funding into the school construction fund.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we will work on a number between now and when budget amendments are due.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just as more of a procedural question, would the commission then meet to vote on a number?
Well, I guess I would ask for a motion to delegate to the chair in consultation with the Senate Finance Committee and House Finance Committee identifying a number. I don't know that we're not going to meet again before. Yeah, we're not going to meet again before budget amendments are due, and we do not have. And that's something we're going to have to do in our next meeting in January, is we do not yet have a policy for virtual meetings.
Would it be far-fetched to use a ballpark number
No.
not to exceed, perhaps?
We could do that.
That would kind of resolve most of the uncertainty?
We could do that.
But I don't have a number to suggest unless perhaps.
I would say not to
expertise in
exceed
the room.
25 billion.
Pardon me?
Not to exceed 25 billion.
I guess what we're kind of anticipating is the difference between projects,
Yeah.
applications, which is sort of an unknown, but again, if there's expertise enough in this room or the body here to project what that might be even on the low side, compared to what is projections put the available funding at. Again, a lot of speculation, but I'm just raising the question. If it's too speculative, then.
So The grant application window you said would open in mid-January, but we probably won't. Do you think you'd have a ballpark estimate in time for, I think budget amendments are going to be due January 13th? Do you think your grant window would be open by then?
Possibly.
Okay.
And we want to push and, get it ready to go as soon as we can.
Yeah, I think we're in a posture where we won't know the total universe of requests until after the budget amendment deadline is passed, and so Tyler, I'm going to put you on the spot and see if you have a recommendation for how we can proceed.
Madam Chair, I don't have a formal recommendation on any amount. I mean, I think there's policy choices before the members. You could go more with the entitlement, the formulaic grant, or you could do more in the competitive. I think you could do either program or either any amount that you wanted to recommend.
Yeah, that's why I think.
May I ask, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Do we know how much got spent on new school construction, let's say, in the last fiscal year? Thought it was on, I'm sorry. Do we know, Ken, how much was spent on new building construction on schools in the last year?
It's typically $1 billion plus in capital costs, renovations and new construction.
So at $1 billion plus, you're looking at another 450, even at the highest level of the 30% would be covered by that, right?
Correct. And then it's probably
so basically another 450 would cover, even at the 30% level, right, the full cost of the construction that we saw in an average year.
Yes, sir. And that amount probably is even approaching $1.5 billion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, exactly, $1.5 billion it would actually cover. That's right.
So why don't we do this? The amendment that is filed is not necessarily the amendment that gets considered by the committee. The committees can do whatever they want with amendments that are filed. So I'm going to say that we take the grant fund up to 1.5 million. Our recommendation is a budget amendment that takes the full amount in the fund up to a minimum of 1.5 billion.
Madam Chair, and at the risk of revealing my ignorance, what is the amount of the increase that if we approved your recommendation, what's the difference between that and the current funding?
You're asking me to do math. I think it would be about
Tyler?
six or 750.
Are you talking, so you're putting it all in the competitive grant fund? Sorry.
I think so.
Okay, so if you're putting up to 1.5 billion, that'd be an additional $1 billion, because you have about 450 million in that competitive grant program now. So the recommendation would be an additional $1 billion to get it to 1.5 billion.
It's a big word there.
That's a big word.
Billion.
Does the commission have a maybe we could split the difference and put half in the direct aid and half to the competitive grants?
Madam Chair, can I ask how much is currently, Kent, how much is currently people asking for in the literary funds?
Well, for years, the maximum loan amount for a project's been 7.5 million. But, the Appropriation Act language increased that substantially beginning July 1, and we're rolling out the process tomorrow to 25 million, as much as 25 million per project. So a substantial increase. But there's been very limited availability of literary funds for loans, the last 5 or 10 years. Of course, market rates were favorable, so not many projects were coming to the fund. But when they typically did, school divisions typically were asking, for oftentimes the full 7.5 million for projects, new construction.
And do you know how much is currently there, like that people are asking for? That's because I know the list is kind of long.
Well, the waiting list is actually quite short now, and the other key provision that the Appropriation Act required is an open enrollment period. So we're moving away after many decades of the waiting list process to award loans to an open enrollment period, and that's what we'll be launching tomorrow. So there's $200 million authorized in loan authority in 23 and another $200 million in 24. And so soon enough, we will know the take-up on literary fund loan requests. But now it's going to be a 10, 12-week open enrollment period, similar to the VPSA pooled bond program, and then we'll assess the loan request against the criteria for awarding loans. But at this point, we don't know the take-up. We don't know the interest yet, but we soon will.
Okay, thank you.
Tyler, let me ask you a question. Do you recall the rationale behind the differential, putting 4 in the direct grants and 450 in the competitive grant?
Yeah, so Senator McClellan, I think the thought was with that $400 million, it was very flexible. You could help divisions who had been doing construction along the way because they could use it for debt service. The divisions could use that by putting it into that escrow account that's created in the budget language, so then they could use it going forward. It was to award an amount to every division right away, and then being able to use that money in flexible uses, whereas the 450 would be competitive based on the needs of a division. I think the budget conferees thought that that would be a pot of money that divisions could go to, some that may have never been able to build a school, to get an upfront grant to help lower the project costs, so then they could go out and get the remaining financing. I think that is the rationale between the two programs this biennium.
Okay, so we could put 750 in each.
Speaking to that, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the concept of what we're perhaps trying to accomplish by putting a number here is to promote the conversation that would bring us closer to fully funding. And I just think that having a number in there is more of a conversation starter than just saying that we making a general recommendation without a number in it.
Yeah, agree.
Obviously, it doesn't bring us to necessarily to any assurance that we'll be fully funded, but it states a goal, and that perhaps a motion could contain that language, fully funding up to a certain amount, and accomplish what we really want to do is, I guess, put the whatever weight a recommendation from this commission carries in the form of a specific communication to that effect.
Yeah. Well, I do think if we were to fully fund it, we're probably looking closer to the 25 billion. If we want to be a little more realistic, something less than 25. So at a minimum, I think we should put $1 billion. I hear 2.5. Is there, do I hear 3? All right, so we'll put 2.5, and then I guess the question is, do we want to put them all in the competitive funds? Do we want to put a portion of it in the direct aid, or do we want to, is there any preference there?
Madam Chair, I think at a minimum, we should put $500 million into the entitlement. I think there was $400 million into the entitlement last year.
Yes.
So $500 million at least into the entitlement part.
Okay. And then the remainder to the remaining 2 to the competitive grants.
Yes, Madam Chair.
I hear that is a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, so that will be recommendation number 5. Are there any additional recommendations? Anyone? Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Senator McClight.
So when we started this process, I expressed concern that we were going to create a process that's going to get us in the same trap in 10 years. I don't yet see a mechanism that is preventing, for instance, one of the localities that spoke today, I looked at their CIP, assuming that they at least have 200 million to 250 in capital assets, their current CIP for capital maintenance is only $1 million. So they're funding at 0.5 of their capital replacement assets. We need to get to some sort of benchmark of level of effort on the CIP side between 1.5 to 2.5% to make sure that there's actually healthy replacement, or else we're just pushing the string down the road, and we're going to get to the same conditions in terms of localities doing one-time Band-Aid fixes, but not the holistic fixes that I think the General Assembly intended to do with saying, okay, we hear you, we're going to assist with it, but you also need to help yourself in terms of the long-term financial fiscal management of the capital assets. I don't know, President Gecker, if some of those conversations, I see some of the mechanisms, but not when it comes to actually maintaining the existing capital assets in any of this language yet. And I just don't want us to get in the same
I
trap.
appreciate that point, Senator McPike, a lot. It's one the board addressed a little bit. You know, we followed, as we were required to, the language in the budget bill with regard to the criteria, but we also added a requirement that capital maintenance plans be submitted with the application. But if it were me alone, I would go a little bit further, and I think along the lines you are, and I think we had this discussion last year, that we ought to have some showing of a commitment to actually spending a few percentage points of the budget on capital maintenance every year in order to maintain the assets that we're building. I mean, I agree with that 100%.
So Madam Chair, I may work on some budget language, and I'm not sure we'll have it. I think in concept, I mean, I'd love to get other people's endorsement or at least feedback on it from the commission, but I just don't want us to do Band-Aids without seeing some actual teeth in the commitment to funding the capital maintenance. Ultimately, it's cheaper to maintain than it is to then go in and have a roof destroy your building, right? I mean, there's a tier of exponential expenses if you don't do capital maintenance over time. And I think that's what a lot of the systems are experiencing. So it's actually hopefully a fiscally money-saving measure overall. But, you know, if others have thoughts on it, you know, I'd certainly like to see some way that we tie this together a little bit better over the long term.
Would the commission be comfortable adopting that concept as a recommendation, or would you prefer to see a little more concrete language?
Madam Chair, this is Stuart Robertson. I appreciate Senator McPike's reminder of what essentially is our mission as stated by the legislature. And I believe that stating that in principle somehow as a communications up front before the session makes sense.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd move that the commission adopt in concept a minimum level of effort for capital maintenance program in school division CIPs.
Is there a second?
Can I just ask one clarifying question? Do you mean, how would you measure the commitment? In other words, a fairly standard measure is percentage of capital value, right?
Yeah, I'd say, Madam Chair, just to follow up, I'd be comfortable with saying no greater than 2.5. They can go beyond that, but as a minimum range between 1.5 and 2.5 as this concept.
Of asset value.
As asset value, of replacement asset value.
Okay, does everybody understand the concept of the recommendation? Delegate LaRock?
Madam Chair, how's that communicated then? It's just a recommendation of the commission?
We would adopt it in concept. Let me ask this. This might be to Ryan. Under the open meetings law, can the members be polled by email to approve final language of a recommendation without calling a meeting, or would we have to call a meeting?
Just consulting with my co-counsel here, I don't think you can do that in a closed meeting by email. I think you'd have to have an open meeting.
So, Madam Chair, if I might, I'd amend my motion to just target it at 1.5 of the capital asset replacement value into a capital maintenance fund program.
Okay, so can you restate what the recommendation would be?
So, Madam Chair, to restate, it would be that the school divisions have a CIP level of effort to capital facilities maintenance programs at a level of at least 1.5 of the asset replacement value of the schools.
All right, any discussion on that?
Yeah, I would second that, Madam Chair.
All right. All those opposed? I'm sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I heard you on the phone. All opposed? Okay, I see some knitted brows in the audience, so I suspect we'll hear about that later. Unless you'd like to say something now.
Madam Chair, Jeremy Bennett with VACO again. Definitely appreciate the concept that Senator McPike is saying that, localities should have skin in the game, and most of them do. Just a little concerned about placing a number, a certain percentage of the capital project, a capital assets value as part of a CIP. You don't really want to tie the hands of our members in terms of what might be a better number for them based on their circumstances. So in concept, a statement that maybe would be more aspirational, the locality should be investing more skin in the game for capital projects, that might be better received. But again, if we start putting in hard numbers as a recommendation, that might be a little problematic for some of our members.
Another option is to, if this is going to be a bill, is to delegate to the board to develop what the number should be, rather than putting it in the code.
Yeah, that might be certainly some of the consideration. I mean, it's fairly industry standard. Director D'Amico and others in the industry can speak to it. I mean, that 1.5 is kind of a minimum.
Okay.
That you're going to be having roof leaks and systematic failures if you do not do that. And that's across almost any portfolio. It only increases if you go to high medical and other specialty systems. I mean, that is kind of a bare minimum type of capital maintenance that's industry standard. If this gentleman has a different number and a different universe that I'm used to, I'm more than willing to listen.
And Madam Chair, Senator McPike, I don't have a number with me, but we'd be happy to work with you going forward, work with the board going forward on that.
Okay. Well, we've already voted on it, and that's what the legislative process is for, so thank you. One recommendation we adopted last year that did not pass that we might want to consider, particularly given this discussion, is what was recommendation number 4, introduce a Section 1 bill to direct the Board of Education to make recommendations to the General Assembly for revisions to the standard of quality to establish standards for operations and maintenance and new construction of public school buildings. And I would entertain a motion to adopt that recommendation again.
I'll make
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? Okay. So that, I believe, any other recommendations to consider for legislation? All right, if not, let me just say really quickly, for our work plan for the 23 interim, by then, grants will have begun to be awarded, and so we would, at our first meeting next year, get a preliminary report on the grant process and how many applicants there were. If the window, I suspect by March or April, the window, they will not probably have all been awarded, but we could at least get a scope of the interest for both the competitive grants and the literary fund grants. We will need to adopt a virtual meeting policy. The statute that took effect in September said that for any public body that wanted to take advantage of the new legislation for public meetings had to adopt a public meeting policy. We can obviously still have virtual participation for this meeting under the original law that allows, if you have a quorum gathered in one place, that you can still have a meeting with virtual participation. But under the new legislation, that gives us the flexibility to have virtual meetings. It gives us the flexibility to have people participate where you do not have a quorum present. And so there have been a number of commissions that have already adopted that. I will ask Ryan to draft a policy for our review and approval. at our first meeting in 2023. We knew this year we were only going to have one meeting because we did not have time for the legislation that we had passed to really take effect, and felt that given the reports that needed to be given, it made more sense to just wait until December. But next year, we will likely have at least two meetings. So we will, at that first meeting, adopt the virtual meeting policy. Any other comments from the public or from members? If not, everyone have happy holidays, and we are adjourned.